The next speaker I'm going to introduce you to is Garrett Monaghan. He is a partner with Arthur Cox. He's a main experience, or has a lot of experience in both energy project finance, as an energy project finance lawyer, both for acting for lenders and borrowers. He's been involved in a number of key projects such as East-West Interconnector and Dublin Waste to Energy, as well as Newry Biomass. So I'll just ask Garrett to come up there.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I'd like to, when I gave the title to Teresa, look, it's a pretty rubbish title. I think, we're some way off project financing, as Russell says, but I think what I'm trying to get across to you today would be, 12 years ago I went to my first wind energy conference in Letterkenny, and I walked in the suit and I was so overdressed, it was comical. And 2 years later I went to it again in Belfast, and I said, well, I've done 7 or 8 deals, so I'm going to wear the cash, I'm going to go cash today. And I rocked up and I was so underdressed. Like in the space of 2 years, the private equity boys that arrived, it became a huge industry within 2 years, and I don't see any reason why the crawlery is not here for biomass. But certainly what did happen in wind, and wind is the analogy, what did happen in wind is that structures got established quick enough, people were credible, and risk, this is all about risk. Risk was assessed, sized, priced, modelled early on, and whether it's the expertise in the banks, the engineers, the lawyers, the investors, and needless to say, the developers, people got on with it, and very quickly, there's plenty of people in the room who've done a lot of wind deals. Wind got scale and it got credibility, and hence the IRR has gone down because it's such an established sector, whereas biomass has got a higher scale. So in terms of the projects in biomass that I've done, certainly Mayo was mentioned. I acted for the banks on Mayo, and what I would say about Mayo, like, it's in liquidation. Banks didn't lose any money, but the banks, what I would say is Mayo is a great project, and it didn't fail for anything other than project-specific reasons. But it'd be wrong to characterise Mayo as, oh, there's biomass, it's a dog of a project. It's absolutely not. And we did Dublin Waste to Energy, and Dublin Waste to Energy was like 500-600 million at a time when Ireland was not getting a jot of debt from the international market. So when Dublin Waste to Energy arrived, it really was, certainly for people like me who make their living from project finance, it was a real sign that Ireland had come back as a bankable, never mind the sector, Ireland had come back as a bankable model. So in terms of the Irish project finance market, just a few comments. Like, if you're going to access project finance, certainly bioenergy in all its forms, it just absolutely should aim to be a generic asset class, the same way that wind is largely now. You know a lot of this already. Like, certainly where we all need to end up is that we have understood structures. There's the finance agreements, there's nothing new in any of those. Limited recourse, certainly anybody who's ever worked in project finance, that is the key concept. During the construction boom in Ireland, limited recourse was just absent from the construction sector, whereas in the project finance sector, what Russell and I would do, or several people in the room, all our deals, no matter if they were only for 5 to 10 million, they're all limited recourse, and it involves higher risk analysis, higher due diligence. But those projects did not crash during the crash. They held their value, and when I say those projects, those loans, when they were sold on by the respective banks, they held their value. When I say follow the money, you protect the cash flow. That's where the risk analysis starts, and that's one of the themes I'm trying to get across in my slides is, and looking at the RHI, if we're all going to go to banks and say, will you finance my project, you have to have an answer ready for some of the risks that are obviously presenting themselves. And at the moment, we don't know all the risks, and we certainly don't know all the answers. But from the developer side, it's very much your job, it's very much your advisor's job to spot those questions, face up to them, and come up with an answer. The answer might not always be the one we collectively want, but in order to bring funders along the curve, you've got to show that you haven't ducked the question. And that's the experience of any other asset class that's ever sought project finance. Available expertise. Expertise takes many forms, but certainly Ireland has got it in spades. Whether it's on the development side, the technical side, engineering, legal, insurance, accounting, it's all here. So biomass is not going to be prejudiced as a sector in Ireland. And I thought Derek's presentation from Feely Timony was excellent, and I think that was indicative of the expertise that's in the country. So that's not an excuse for biomass not getting legs in this sector. Again, it's a truism. Each asset and technology has defining characteristics, absolutely. And certainly from the perspective of a lot of my practice is for the banks, you know, invariably the bankers are absolutely, they appreciate that, and consistent with Russell's experience, so are the equity investors. And you know, the defining characteristics actually is the basis on which you can push up your IRR. If it's different from wind, it means, okay, well, can I get a better IRR out of it? Can I price it? Can I manage that risk? Playing the long game, absolutely. I mean, here we are in 2017. We all want to be back here in 5 years' time with a sector which is 5, 10, 20 times bigger than it is at the moment. The rest of it is, in some respects, self-explanatory, but certainly I'm a big fan of fronting up to risks. If you go into the project finance phase and you're instructing lawyers and any other advisors, and you're trying to work out the answers on the hoof, you know, it gets expensive, it gets frustrating. You know, in all circumstances, it's so much better to try and front up and allocate these risks as best you can, rather than just hoping it'll be okay, we'll fudge it, we'll get through, you know, and that's invariably doesn't work. And certainly, my personal opinion of my own, certainly on the funders, you know, the better project financiers are typically, whether they're my clients or whether I'm opposite them, you know, and certainly in Ireland, it has to be said, there's a lot of expertise in the banks. And bear in mind, as Russell said, at the heart of project finance is risk assessment. These guys will give you $1 million, they'll give you 100 million on the basis of the project, not on the basis of any particular balance sheet. So, you know, due diligence, risk analysis, but problem solving. And I think that's one attribute of people who work in project finance in any description. You've got to be able to not be scared of problems and try and find solutions. Again, just in my own opinion, people don't necessarily have to agree with it, but it's certainly, I would draw your attention to the fact that we have a lower interest rate environment. You know, it's almost a shame more generally that we're not building more infrastructure. We should have a metro. We should have a Dart underground. Money's never been cheaper. By the time we get ourselves sorted, interest rates will have started to go back up. But we are in a low interest rate environment, and moreover, around Europe, there's not many opportunities to lend. So it's a cracking time to be seeking project finance. And Ireland, I think, is generally perceived as not just in biomass, not just in wind, but we have assets, we have deals. So funders from all over the world are certainly looking to do deals here. I use the word non-vanilla because that's what biomass is for the time being. So I think it's actually a great time to be trying to push along with projects that are comparatively complicated compared to, let's say, a refit onshore wind project. So, and that's a positive. AER, refit, you know, these are, it doesn't matter if they're too complicated or they may not succeeded in their aims. They are politically stable. Again, you know, during the crash, the Irish government did not muck about with refit, whereas in Britain, they cut the solar tariff, Spain, they did the same, Czech Republic, they did the same. Politically, during the crash, Ireland did not do hara-kiri in relation to trying to give certainty. So, you know, that's how we're perceived. Russell has talked about equity. Absolutely, he's absolutely right that you know, a new class has emerged of saying, well, actually, we'll do it all equity and we'll refinance it at a later date. But again, I don't want to repeat Russell's slides, but the point is, just because it's all equity doesn't mean they won't put you through the ringer when it comes to due diligence. So RHI, is it the shot in the arm? I mean, that's what we're all trying to push towards. It's certainly the way to start. I would make the observation, like, you know, is the RHI a solo run? Is it all about heat? If it is, that's fine. If there's no separate support for the power element, fine. You know, provided we're all clear on that from the start. And I certainly defer to some of the developers in the room who may have a view on that. But, you know, in terms of when you're doing your, you know, where's the revenues, where's it all coming from? If there's no refit, fine. So back to the RHI, what number do you set it at? If it's too low, well then why bother? If we know from the off that it's too low, you know, we're kind of wasting our time. So when I read the consultation, and I'm looking at it now after sitting through the whole of the day, I don't want to repeat what more qualified people than me have talked about in relation to the consultation, but I do want you to think about, the RHI will come out with, it'll come up with its answers, it'll come up with the definitive view, and it'll be the policy. Then we all have to sort of take that policy and say, okay, take it to equity investors, take it to funders and say, okay, what do you think? And that's where it's all our collective job to take these criteria, to take these different attributes of the RHI and say, okay, yes, it's compatible with project finance, and this is why. So in the next 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years, in terms of, this is the sort of stuff that we all collectively need to be ready to have a definitive answer on, so that we're not spending 18 months in credit committees with the banks coming up with answers that to questions that we didn't even know exist. Now is the time to think about the questions. So acceptable, all right, so that's, again, I'm just robbing this from the consultation, but like what heat technologies are in and what are out. ETS, Fred touched on that earlier, I'll come back to that, but I think that's really important. These are the outputs. Again, these are all questions that banks and funders will ask. Okay, well, you've come to me with a particular form of combustion, but in no way is that ever going to meet the minimum energy efficiency obligations, so why did you bother? These are all the particular targets everybody needs to be ready for. The compulsory use of heat one is a curious one. Like, and certainly it's something which on Mayo we grappled with for some time as to, can you use heat to dry your own product? Is that an abuse of the sentiment of Refit 3? It was very difficult to get a definitive answer, but in 18 months' time, when we're doing our first biomass projects, we shouldn't be wasting time or spending money trying to come up with that answer. It should just be definitive, and we move on. And with the other criteria, we'll come back to those. So size considerations. I think again, this will when the RHI actually issues and when it's settled. What is it really trying to do? Like, okay, at the heart of it, it should just displace fossil fuels. But does that mean that because we are heading towards 2020 at a hurtling rate, is the easy win just to go for the large ETS and say, well, there you go. There's your, if we plough money into a big cement plant, and we provide the heat there, can we get to our targets that way? I don't know if that's the thinking, but it would be a shame, because I certainly think it would cannibalise the natural evolution of the smaller to medium installation, where I would have thought the larger market opportunities are. I love the phrase counterfactuals. That'd be like the Donald would come out with that. I had to look at it a few times. So counterfactuals are fossil fuels, as far as I could understand from the. So it is about displacing the oil, the gas, the coal, etc. So I think the ETS is a huge issue personally, insofar as if it swings towards the ETS, it might do the job for the first 4 or 5 years, but really, what kind of a market are you left with afterwards? Again, I defer to people who probably got more deeper thinking on it than me. Nothing you don't already know. Somebody earlier talked about the district heating point. I think in the last session, to me, district heating, I'd just be looking at, who cares if it's used for district heating? I'd only be looking at my question would be, surely you just look at the source of the heat. Is it through a biomass boiler? Is it through deep geothermal? It's end use. I don't care. Like, if it's district heating, fine. And an important point that I took from the consultation, and certainly going to the heart of project finance, it says in the consultation, it says the RHI will be paid to the producer. Well, refit in wind is paid to the off-taker, to the ESB, Viridian, and so on. If it's going to be paid to the producer, well, great. So district heating and the end use, well, that's extra revenue. If the RHI is paid, I'll come back to some chart later, but if the RHI is paid to the generator at source, from a project finance perspective, that's a nice place to start. That's a nice simple place. Okay, the revenue's coming into you. If the guys in the 600 apartments down the street pay for the district heating on top of that, great. But again, to me, that would be, in terms of trying to come out with practical examples from today, again, district heating, it didn't cross my mind about its use. I'd only be interested in, is it qualifying for one of these RHTs? I talked about the compulsory use of heat. So I'd go to the last comment first. Is there an accepted best practice? By the time you're bringing these transactions to Irish or international banks, absolutely no way should this be open for discussion. This piece has to be put to bed, because I think it might depend on this specific installation, but certainly I think that was a difficult issue under refit, and it was hard to get a definitive position. Tariff differentiation, I think Derek touched on this. Again, I'm only putting this up from the purpose of, so you think about it from a bank's perspective. Is it workable? How do you differentiate it, and how long is it out there for? I don't want to spend the afternoon going into the details of these, but certainly, is it diversity for diversity's sake? How many bans do we need? We are at an embryonic stage of an industry. If we come out with too many bans for a nascent industry, again, is it? I'd be wary of that. I'd imagine metered heat is the way to go. Certainly, I'd be surprised if it wasn't. And there's an interesting comment in the consultation about replacing end of life. I mean, is the focus about trying to just get rid of old kit? So should you incentivize somebody who's going to accelerate the replacement of the oil boiler? Certainly duration, again, it's common sense, but from a bank's perspective, it is absolutely critical to the credit assessment. If you want a 10-year loan, but the support only lasts 8 years, it's not going to be a great place to start from. So, again, this is from the perspective of allowing a bank to write a credit paper that it understands, and write a credit paper within 2 months of starting work on a transaction, rather than writing a credit paper 18 months into a credit transaction. And whether it's on the advisory side or the development side, there's absolutely no winners if some of these issues are just fudged, and we hope for the best. These are common sense. We've done enough of these deals now in different parts of the Irish economy. Grandfathering is interesting insofar as I think it was good that the consultation at least acknowledged it. The extent to which there's any, I don't know the scale of potential grandfathering transactions or projects in the country, I don't know. But I think it was encouraging that at least the consultation recognised it, and certainly when you can get to in front of a bank, if you're able to say, I'm not prejudiced because I started my project 4 years before refit actually came through, that's great. Just quickly on this, insofar as duration, I talked about that. Profile, again, I think the indication is that it would be a flat payment. That suits everybody. That would be from a banking perspective, I would have thought a flat fee is the way to go. CPI, absolutely critical point to any model that there's an element of indexation. Budget management, I mean, certainly by that I mean the government's budget. How do they manage the budget and not spend it in 2 years rather than 5 years? Self-explanatory. Anybody wants the slides, I'll email them to you. But certainly this was my sort of a summary of where we got to. Now, just quickly on project finance. Plenty of people in the room have done project finance, but this is just a generic slide I use. That could be for a road, it could be for a hospital, biomass. It doesn't really matter. But, certainly in wind, this could be a 6-month process. On a PPP, it could be an 18-month project. For biomass, I've absolutely no idea. But I wouldn't press the green button. I wouldn't press the project kickoff unless we all had collectively hardened up our views on all of the issues that are, being floated in the consultation. But once you get going, in project finance, it's been done 100 times. It's not difficult. That's a shame. My cracking diagram. What I'd say about right, I see what I've done. Right. So in terms of the components of project finance, there are multiple components. The difficult part in biomass compared to wind will be you've got moving parts. You've got more interfaces than a wind project. But if you front up to that and you say, fair enough, I accept that, great. There's no reason why we can't get the deals done. So what I just draw your attention to here is, I've written down a heat purchase agreement. If this is a heat deal and heat purchase, well, that's presumably the RHI is going to come in here. If you're going to tell me that you're going to sell 500,000 tons of wood pellets as well, do I model them or do I put them in now? In terms of other revenues into the project, again, it's a generic set of slides, it's a generic diagram, but the point I want you to be clear on here is interface. There's quite a lot of interfaces to manage there compared to wind, but there's absolutely no reason why it can't be done. Again, just things to take away from today, at the moment, wind energy, renewables in Ireland today has been done on a refit basis. Refit's coming to an end. Feed-in tariffs globally are coming to an end. We're going to move towards contracts for differences. We're going to move towards auctions. That is the reality, and that's probably appropriate. If the heat sector gets out of the blocks on a feed-in tariff structure, well, great. But I think we all should be looking past 15, 20, 30 years. Quite quickly we're moving towards these new routes to market. The data centers have changed the rules. They've changed the composition, the complexion of the Irish energy market. Even though very few have been built, the demand is going up. So at what stage are we going to see corporate PPAs being done in scale, private wire? By that I mean, to me as a lawyer, I'm just looking at these saying, okay, well, can I do a deal without waiting for refit? Can I do a deal without waiting for a feed-in tariff? I think that possibility is there where it certainly wasn't there 5 years ago. Again, happy to, it's as much as to have a debate with people as well. Bioenergy specific risks, sure there's some, but of course it's compatible. It's compatible if we work out the questions primarily, then work out the answers, and we have a collective responsibility. The Irish project finance market is, for a small country, is very well established and respected. I think we can work it out. We'd be mugs if we didn't learn from the wind sector. There's nothing wrong with doing 20, 30 small deals so we all cut our teeth and we get government certainty, and we get to the extent to which we've got to go to court to fight stuff out to get a particular ruling, whether it's planning, whether it's CER rulings and so on. Fine, let's do it before we find out the hard way. But I'd be very positive on the sector, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to speak today. Again, I think I've used up my time. Thank you very much.